Hello, everyone, and good evening, and welcome to another late night or late morning, wherever you are in the world watching this, author interview here on the Wandering Scribe YouTube channel. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and I'm excited to showcase this guest to you all. Now, my guest today is one who I met a few weekends ago at a library convention in Anacon, and an absolutely amazing person. And here's a little bit about my guest before we dive into the questions. Living on the outskirts of Los Angeles, California for over a decade, turned my guest from a one time fantasy writer into an author of the cyberpunk series The Glitch Logs. When not hammering out new stories by the light of a dying laptop, my guest also enjoys gaming, tabletop RPGs, and escaping the cyber dystopia to spend time in nature. She's also the author of Daylight Ghosts, co-creator of the Dracula Files, and author of the Dark Menagerie, I'm probably butchered that name, storied jewelry series. And in this interview, viewers and listeners, we'll be talking about this book, which, if you remember my update video I did a few weeks back, I told you that I was very excited to showcase this book on the channel. So let's give a big round of applause to a first timer here on the channel, author Rachel Beck. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the channel today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Rachel. You're welcome. So before we dive into your book, I'm gonna be doing a lot of this just a just a heads up. What else can you tell us about your background and just a little bit more about you?
Let's see. Well, I live in Southern California, just outside of LA. I've been an author for quite a number of years now. I've wanted to write ever since I was a little kid. The Defrag, that book you've got there, came out in 2018, and I've been publishing, ever since. By day, I'm a business analyst. So I get to spend a lot of time talking to clients and software developers, which is a lot of fun. I really enjoy that. And then, of course, by night, I'm an author.
Nice. Wow, you're really right in your perfect field. It sort of actually blends perfectly being a business analyst and, of course, being an author of a series that definitely has to deal with cybers and the matrix and stuff like that. So it blends beautifully. And that kind of leads into the big startup question or questions. What was sort of your aha moment that you knew that you wanted to be a writer?
Wow. I guess I've wanted to be a writer ever since I was a little kid. Like I remember being 6 and like wanting to write stories about dragons and things like that. Probably ever since I could read, I wanted to be a writer as well. I remember my parents got myself and my siblings this really old computer program now called the Writing and Creativity Center, and it was this
Ooh,
like
okay.
computer program that was like to help kids write, and so you could add pictures to your writing, and it would read it out loud to you in this really terrible computer voice. And but yeah, and then gave you all kinds of prompts and ideas for writing, and so I kind of started tapping away at there, in
Nice.
there on that, and here we are today.
Awesome. That's actually really, really good. Now, for those who are new to the channel and are new to you, Rachel, what can you tell us about Diffrag and a little synopsis about and sort of about how it came to be?
So, Defrag and the Glitch Logs is the story of Glitch. She's a hacker and she makes a living stealing from giant corporations that had it coming. And so it's every book in the series is like a new heist that she goes on. Heads off to steal something, things go wrong, and she has to roll with the punches as she sort of travels across this neon lit city. Travels into its underground, the high skyscrapers, sort of the highest heights and the lowest lows, and makes friends and enemies, and sort of is really a high-paced action adventure sort of series.
Nice. So now let's go back in time to the creation of the glitch logs.
Mhm.
So, when you started the draft of the glitch logs, when you were just formulating the ideas of what you want to write, what was the need or desire you want to satisfy for your future readers?
Well, let's see. So the glitch logs itself actually came out of a tabletop RPG I was playing, kind of like D&D, but it's a cyberpunk game.
Okay.
It's called The Sprawl. It's an indie game powered by the Apocalypse for those indie RPG fans out there. And really fell in love with the genre through that game. And it was going to be a comic, and then it became a book. The big sort of drive that I wanted to satisfy in my readers, sort of my reason for writing the book, if you will, is that I had fallen head over heels for cyberpunk, really enjoyed it as a genre. But this was back in 2018, right? So there was quite a lot less visibility on cyberpunk. Like now we've got like Cyberpunk 2077 and Edge Runners came out, right? There's a lot more sort of around right now. We're experiencing kind of a second wave of cyberpunk right now, which is really exciting. But at that point, there was not a lot of people sort of in my community that were also fans of cyberpunk. And I wanted I wanted them to like join me and enjoy that and have somebody to talk to about it. But I was having a hard time finding media that they would enjoy. So finally I was like, you know what, here you go. I'm just going to write you a book and this will make you love cyberpunk and then you can come be a fan of cyberpunk with me. And it worked.
Awesome. And then as you developed the story even more through draft revisions, editing, long nights, I imagine, creating the first book, and then of course the series, what sort of promise were you making to them? Had it changed from your initial desire when you created the story, or has it remained the same?
I mean, I think all stories grow and develop with the authors, but in my case, I think I've generally kept to the main trajectory. My writing's gotten tighter as I've gone. I mean, the first book is very short, but sort of my big arc I thought was going to take 9 books, and now I think I can do it in 5. So, it has tightened up over time, and the books have also gotten longer, so that contributes. But generally speaking, yeah, I think I've stayed true to sort of the underlying vision of the story, which is to tell a story that makes people fall in love with the genre and to explore the idea that in a world where everything is for sale, the sort of last stand we have to rebel against that is to care about each other, even at cost to ourselves.
Nice. And viewers, when I was reading the back of this, and to be upfront, I've never seen The Matrix. I've never really got into the cyberpunk genre myself, but upon reading the back of this book made me consider being considered a fan of the genre. Now, I don't want to say up front just yet because still in the midst of this book, and don't worry, the review of this book will be coming soon. So just you'll wait have to see my initial review. And speaking of reviews, of course, now as you said before, Rachel, Defrag came out in 2018, and since then you've written 4 more books. So what has been the feedback like overall? And has it been positive, negative, mixed? And as a bonus question, is there a particular review that has stayed with you since the inception of the glitch logs?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. So first off, I will say, I think this makes you the perfect reader for this because you are also, you're in the same place that all my friends were. You're not familiar with the genre, but I hope this makes you love it. And secondly, I'd say overall, the review's been really positive. The Glitch Logs isn't a series that takes itself too seriously. It's very fun. It's very high paced. It's very approachable, right? You're supposed to get in there and have a good time.
Right.
And the reviews have generally reflected that, right? People like the cyberspace, they really enjoy the imagery of it, which is great because originally it was drafted as a comic, not a book. And so the visuals really came through as a result of that. But yeah, mostly the reviews have said like, wow, I love this. It's so cyberpunky. It's so much fun. It's so high action. You can, it's quick, it's short. You just get to enjoy yourself for a few hours. And that's been really good. As far as a particular review, Wow, that's hard. I will say that the reviews that stand out to me the most are not necessarily the ones that go up on Goodreads, but the ones that people email me about directly, and the ones where they say, "Hey, I didn't read Cyberpunk before, but now I love it." Those
Ooh, all
ones
right.
are the sorts of like, I guess it's not really a review, but I guess the fan mail that really sticks
Right.
with you. It's like, yeah, we made that connection. Like, welcome to the genre. I'm so glad you're here. Like, we're gonna have so much fun.
I absolutely agree. And I definitely think that is, I would argue, probably more impactful than reviews. Not saying reviews are impactful. Reviews are really good, but it's those connections that, we as authors make with our readers, and getting those little responses, those little, of course, you said fan email, those little fan support, everything that is huge. And that's really, really impacting for an author, especially being an author, which is, of course, as I've said numerous times on this show, a very lonely business, because you're spending hours and hours creating a book, putting all the work into it, and not knowing if it's going to resonate with your audience or reach the goals that you set out with it. So for you, Rachel, when you began writing the glitch logs and the books that came after it, did you ever have that sense of like imposter syndrome in the back of your mind? And if not, what has disciplined you to continue writing, because this is your passion, this is where you are needed, this is who you are?
So I think that there's kind of two answers to that. One is that when I started writing again, 2018, I didn't know if anybody else was still reading cyberpunk, right? I didn't know if I was the last comer to the genre. So what I did initially is that I actually posted a couple of the chapters for free online, a chapter a week, and just sort of distributed it that way. And then I started getting fan mail, and that was the moment I knew, okay, other people are reading, there are still fans of this. And that was the moment when I made the shift to being like, okay, it's going to be a full book, we're going to publish, we're going to make more of these, and so on and so forth. As far as the imposter syndrome and questions like that, one of the things that I really focus on is knowing who my audience is.
Mm.
Right. We've talked a little bit about like who I wrote the book for, but staying laser focused on that. If somebody comes up to me and says like, this isn't my thing, or I didn't care for it, or which I guess I don't get too many of those. It's more the like women can't write cyberpunk variety. I didn't write the book for them, right? I wrote the book for people who wanted to get into cyberpunk, and I wanted to write it for people who would enjoy it just as much as I did. So knowing that that's the people I'm writing for, not these people who aren't interested in it,
Right.
that helps me, stay focused. And if someone comes up and says, it's not for me, that's okay. I can just shrug it off and keep writing, because I know that I do have an audience of people who do enjoy the work, and I just keep writing for them.
That's awesome. And that's actually really, really important too. And we are going to go more in depth about the audience, which actually is a perfect segue to now the business side of being an author. So for you, Rachel, when you were crafting this series, initially this started off as a comic, but then it transitioned over into a book.
Mhm.
Now, when you finished the draft, you got everything you wanted, you got it edited, you got the cover you wanted. Did you want to go the self-publishing route solely because you knew the genre would suit well in the indie world, or did you want to try to see if a traditional publishing house would find the glitch logs perfect for the sci-fi mega houses?
So for me, going indie was kind of a no-brainer. Like I did sit down and do some like market research and things like that. Right, like I'm a fairly analytical person.
Mm,
But the thing is that, especially remember 2018, not a lot of cyberpunk books were like coming out sort of like in the mass media. It's not that books weren't being published, right? Like
right.
people are always publishing, but as far as like big publishers were going, cyberpunk wasn't anywhere on their radar, as far as I could tell. And being, a traditionally published author in this day and age, especially for like a smaller genre like cyberpunk, doesn't really give you that many advantages. I actually stood to make quite a lot more money, just from like a pure business perspective, if I went indie than if I went through a traditional publisher. Just given the way that the market shook out and things like that. So yeah, for me, it was pretty straightforward. Like I crunched the numbers. I looked, if I do X, if I do Y, and indie was the pretty clear choice.
Nice. And I think before we get into the next question regarding the audience, I definitely think it's important to discuss and probably define what is a cyberpunk for those who aren't familiar with that term. Some people would think, is it like science fiction or is it its own thing? So for you, Rachel, in like your crafting of the story, like what is cyberpunk?
Okay, so you've asked a hotly contested topic, so I'm going to answer it. And if somebody disagrees with me in the comments, that's fine. They're welcome to their own opinions. Cyberpunk is a subgenre of science fiction. It tends to deal with sort of a theoretic future, usually a dystopic one, right? Where giant corporations have taken over the world. Everything is for sale. And it deals with questions like, what makes us human? If everything's for sale, how is technology that could make our lives better also being used to control us or to make large companies profit? Like it could be a great thing, but instead it's being used to make our lives worse. It tends to deal with that. It tends to deal with the questions of like cybernetics and like the implications of sort of the broader reaching field of like cyberspace and the internet. Aesthetically, though, if you really want to say like, wait, what is cyberpunk? Picture a city where it's always night and raining for some reason, and there's neon glowing in an oil slicked puddle, and somebody's turning up their collar against a harsh world. That's kind of the vibe, if you will. Touch points are The Matrix, which you mentioned, Ghost in the Shell, Blade Runner. For books, you've got like things like Snow Crash, and of course Gibson's Neuromancer, and like the whole Sprawl series, things like that. If you like video games, the Deus Ex Machina series, and of course Shadowrun as both the tabletop RPG and the video game series.
And also, let's not forget Cyberpunk. What's it full? The last
2077. Yes, of course. What an excellent point. Yeah, and the companion piece, Edge Runners, right? The anime.
So that is like really fascinating. And again, yeah, if that is a genre that most people would not really know much about. And again, now going into the audience. So audience and knowing who your audience is very important when creating your book. So Rachel, when you were crafting your book and doing the market research, were you nervous that the audience at the time in 2018, as you said previously, it was not there? Were you nervous that your book may not reach the expectations that you set out? And also, adding to that, how important is it for an author to really understand their audience? Not in the sense like who they're writing for, but who is the target audience that this book may interest?
Right. So a couple things went into sort of my, I guess, market research of readers. One is that I do a lot of conventions. Even prior to publishing the Glitch Logs, I co-owned a small production company. And so we were already at shows and at conventions, and like I knew how to pitch and I knew how to sort of get a general read on like, is this going well? Am I finding like the right people for this book? So I sort of had that baseline understanding. For me, again, I published the free chapter, so I was able to get that immediate feedback to be like, okay, yeah, there are people out there that are reading it. Of course, I was scared. I think every first-time author is afraid when they put their first work out in the world. Like, is anyone going to love this? But I was also able to like sort of mitigate my risks by I did a short run. So I think the first run was like 50 bucks, which is enough that you've got like a chunk of books. There's a stack of boxes in your living room. But small enough that like I knew if I couldn't sell 50 books, then this was never going to work, right? And so it was like a risk that I could take at that point to spend the money for those 50 books without completely breaking the bank, but also knowing, hey, if I can sell 50 books, then I can probably sell this series. So that was sort of like the test, and then that sold out like almost immediately, and then I had to make and you get much bigger runs after that. And just keep going to shows, keep reaching out to people, meeting them through the internet. You do your marketing thing, and you just keep selling books. I think I'm on, I actually don't know how many runs I'm at this point. At any rate, that's how it works out.
Nice. Well, still, that is congratulations on that, like on the success of the Glitch Logs and your other series too, which that I think is truly like the end all be all for any like author who just starting out. And yeah, if they can't sell like this certain amount of books, then that does kind of make them look in on themselves like, can I actually do this? Because I definitely feel, I was speaking with another guest on this, there's like two different brains that an author must have: the creative brain and the business brain. The creative brain exists when you're creating your book. When your book is done, that brain shuts off, and then you have the business brain, which is very difficult because that never shuts off because you're constantly marketing your book. And I definitely feel you maybe also agree with this too, Rachel. In addition to knowing your audience, also understanding the genre that you're writing in. Now, as you said again, that the cyberpunk genre, at least at the time in 2018, wasn't really there. It has reached new heights now with, of course, of new books, games, movies, and so forth. But when you were writing this story and how you created the narrative, how you developed your characters, and the many arcs that connect throughout the series, what books were key players in your research and also helping you find your voice as an author?
That's also a big question. So some of them were in genre and some of them were out of genre. So like, for example, like again, Snow Crash, Neuromancer, sort of like all the sort of big first wave cyberpunk books. Those are of course all fundamental to like, like sort of understanding like the big ideas behind the genre. But I actually really like other authors like Lois McMaster Bujold. I like Max Gladstone. Three Parts Dead was really good. Like a number of like authors in other genres, but whose writing styles I really admired, helped to shape my own style. And then of course to just bring part of my own thing to it as well, right? Like Glitch has a very distinct voice, and sort of how she narrates and critiques the world around her. It's sort of like she's constantly like making like low grade snarky comments about the world around her, but just to herself, right? And so that part is sort of like her own specific style, but definitely influenced by fantasy authors, sci-fi authors, a whole mess of people out there.
Yes, 100% agree. And I definitely feel that's one aspect of research that not a lot of people really take into consideration. I've spoken with a lot of indie authors on this question, and they 100% agree that it's not so much reading that helps you grow as an author. It's reading within the genre that you're trying to get into, because then you can see what works, what doesn't. And it's all up to you to see, is this the genre that you want to write in, and see if this works. Now, you don't want to copy or imitate people from you've read, but you definitely want to see what are they writing about, how they go about the characters, how they create their world, and just writing notes, which definitely helps you get an idea of your reader. Which leads into that question, Rachel. So since 2018 to now, do you have a good understanding of who your reader is, or I should say your readers are?
I mean, I think I'm going to be surprised every convention. There's always the thing about finding readers is that I try not to write anybody off, right? Anybody could be a new fan of this genre, and sometimes they come from really unlikely places. I remember there was one year, it was right after the pandemic when things were opening up, where the vast majority of people who bought my book at one show were all Hispanic moms. Like they'd show up with a bunch of kids in tow and they'd be like, oh, I want this. And they bought it. That wasn't, I wouldn't have known to go look for Hispanic moms, but if they want to like come and, be part of the fun and enjoy the genre, absolutely. Like, the more the merrier, come on in. So I try not to, on the one hand, I know who I wrote the series for, like we've talked about. But on the other hand, I think it's important not to ever write anyone off. Just because at a glance you wouldn't think of that person as being somebody who would enjoy your work, it doesn't hurt to tell them about it, right? Still, share your story, get it out there, and you might be surprised by the people that enjoy your writing after that.
That is, again, 100% true. You never know who your readers are. Because I definitely think most people assume that if you like fantasy, you're this kind of reader. You're like science fiction, you're this kind of reader. But that's not true. There's no, like, I would say the word like stereotype for each genre of reader. Some people will probably assume there may be stereotypes, but that's not the de facto. And we should never, as you said, Rachel, write someone off, because you never know. You may get a new brand of readers that could help you grow as an author. And kind of adding on as like a little fun question, what has been your favorite interaction with your readers, and is there one that sticks out to you the most?
I mean, wow. I mean, there's been a lot of them. Like, frankly, like, fans are amazing, and like I almost feel bad picking just one interaction. But I do remember one thing that I guess stands out to me when you ask that question is I remember the first time I was at a table, at a show, and someone comes up and they pick up your book and they open a page and they read a little bit. And I remember this woman, she sort of leafed through it, she read a bit, and then she looked up and she looked me dead in the eye and she said, "I love this." Right. And it was the first time that it happened. And, it wasn't the last time, but the first time it happens, to have that instant connection with a reader, like, that just stays with you, right? Like, to find that moment where you're like, you put a story out into the world and someone picked it up and it made them happy. That's a great moment.
Nice. That is true. And that's, again, you touched on a thing that I think every author strives to do is, at the end of the day, we just want to tell a good story. We just want to tell a good story that resonates with our readers, that connects with them. And honestly, what more could you ask? And this then leads into another important question, which is another heavy hitter, Rachel. So I'm gonna lay the context for you on this one. So many readers know this question already, but it's probably the most important one, which is, I had a guest on the show a year ago, Natalie Wright, author of Season of the Dragon. I met her at the LA Festival of Books. And when we were discussing her book, Season of the Dragon, she explained to me that was her 7th book. I was stunned. I was under the impression that was her first book, her debut novel. And she's like, no, that was my 7th. I wrote 6 books before that. None of them hit anyone until I wrote the 7th. And then she dropped a pearl of wisdom, which is a hard pill to swallow, but I think every indie author really needs to understand this, which is there's no guarantee that your debut novel is going to be an overnight success and be the start of your legacy. She said that is the biggest lie that any indie author could believe. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. I had an author on the show last month, Andy Peliquin, whose debut series was just that. It got all the acclaim it got, as it should. It reached new heights and allowed him to live off of the royalties to create 3 new series. But on the offside, you could rise a certain height, your book could drop a little bit, you could rise again, and then just completely flatlines. And that, of course, brings this sense of imposter syndrome, but more so is that of like being considered like a fraud. Like, what am I doing? Why am I in this industry? I didn't do anything. But that in turn goes to the goals that you set out, which is, what were your long-term goals? Are you trying to be an author to live off the royalties of your book and work that way? Or are you trying to be an author in the sense that you just want to have a book out? What are your goals in the long run? So for you, Rachel, in your own opinion, how important is it for young authors to really understand that concept, that there is no guarantee that your book's going to be an overnight success, but it should not deter you from writing if writing is truly your passion? Because, as another guest said, grit trumps talent.
So, lot to unpack there.
I told you it was a heavy hitter.
So, I think it is important for people to know what their metric for success is, right? Like, otherwise you'll be chasing this ever moving goalpost, because there's always like some place to go, that's to go up. For myself, I try and have multiple scenarios for success. I don't chase just one thing, because usually that success isn't necessarily something you control, and I like to focus on things I can control. not things I can't
Right.
control, which is, I think, key for any creative to staying sane when they're trying to market their thing. So, do I want to write a book, like be able to live full-time off the royalties of my books? Yeah, that'd be so much fun. But I also have picked a day job that I really super enjoy. And as long as my stories are getting into the hands of authors, like that's also a success path for me.
Right.
I keep publishing, I keep writing, but I also keep going after my day job because that's something that also makes me happy. You know, or maybe someday I'll pick a new job and writing will still be part of that, but maybe it'll be in some completely new way that I don't even know.
Right.
For me, it's more important to focus on what can I do now that will bring me joy and that will move me in a direction I'm happy with. So for me, always writing the next book, right? Writing
Right.
brings me joy. That's a thing I can control. I can work on the next book. Going to shows and meeting readers. I love going to shows and talking to readers face to face, getting to meet new people, getting to connect with people who've already read the book, all of that. That brings me joy. So that's a thing I'm going to keep doing. Both those things eventually could lead to me being a full-time author where that's my day job. They also could stay this cool, fun side gig that I do while I pursue this other career that I also really love.
Right.
So for me, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket and say I have to make my success be this one thing or
Right.
I failed as a human, right? Instead,
Right.
I want to set myself up for success by focusing on what I can control and having lots of ways that I can succeed.
Definitely. And again, that goes back to, I think, what we talked about. It's like your end goals. Like, what are your end goals in the long term? And if you understand those, I think, again, yeah, you'll be fine to pursue your passion, whatever it may be. Which then leads into the next set of questions, Rachel. So looking back, and this is the fun one, a little nice one, not like the heavy hitters, but looking back at all you've done, from the shows you've gone to, from the readers you've met at the conventions that you've been a part of since 2018 to now, have you ever thought back to yourself of how different your life would have been if you were not a writer? How different would your life be?
I mean, it'd be pretty different, I'd say. Writing is a pretty significant part of my life. I actually got into my current job as a business analyst by way of being a copywriter. And I only became a copywriter because I was trying to figure out how to market my book, right? So if I
Right.
hadn't been trying to market my book, I never would have picked up all those books and like learned how to be a copywriter. A copywriter is like the person who writes like content on websites, or, you know, if you're like in your app and you're like looking for, you know, and it says like, hey, you know, it's great to see you this morning, or, you know, some sort of instructions, somebody has to write that.
Right.
That's what a copywriter is, right? And I never would have
Okay.
gotten into that field if I hadn't been trying to market my own book, right? So writing books opened up career paths for me that I never would have thought of, and would not have been possible to me if I hadn't also been chasing this, you know, this book writing career.
Awesome. So yeah, accurately said, perfectly said. Thank you, Rachel, for saying that. And I think that then leads into the next set of questions, Rachel, which for you, who have been your biggest supporters on this journey of yours?
Oh, wow. Another big question. So my husband, for sure. Absolutely. He is my number one fan and is constantly pushing me to try new things and reach out to more people and, you know, put myself out there more. So
Right.
big shout out to him. Connecting with other cyberpunk authors has also been huge, just to, you know other people in the genre and, you know, sort of get to commiserate and, you know, talk strategy and talk shop and all things like that. That's been great. I don't know. I have a really good community just of friends and people that just generally support me, that make my
Awesome.
life really happy. And like, shout out to all of them for, you know, telling me that they want to read my book or promoting me on social media before, you know, I had any kind of fan base. They were kind of my first fan base, not necessarily because they read the books, but because they knew me. And then, you know, sort of bigger than that, like every single person that's ever sent me an email telling me they love the book, like, bless you guys, you are the reason book 4 is being written right now. Like, it is, I can't tell you how much it means to, you know, find like a positive review, a little message. all of those things are just huge shot in the arm to an author.
Awesome. And it kind of leads into the follow-up question to this. So would you say that those interactions with your fans, your readers, validate your promise that you set out with the glitch logs in the beginning?
Oh yeah, absolutely. People who did not know about or read cyberpunk before now read cyberpunk, and they're big fans of the genre, and they had fun reading my book. That was 100% what I set out to do, and they are 100% like successful in that regard. Every new reader is a new success.
Nice. And still on the topic of validation, have you ever gotten a sense of validation from other authors who have come across your work? And I ask this because it is really interesting discussion. Some people have given different responses on this. And why I think it's important is that whenever you go into any field, whatever it may be, with all the knowledge you have is one thing. But then to have your peers recognize it and give credit where credit is due is another thing. Now, some authors who I've had on the show answer this question. They say it's nice when other authors see their work. Sometimes they've said that they don't seek validation in the sense that, it's good that they recognize it, but it's not their sole goal. So, Rachel, I was wondering, you could talk a little bit more about that. Have you ever gotten a sense of validation from any other authors on social media, or authors that you encountered at conventions, or even authors who have emailed you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's part of like, especially other authors in your genre. That's part of how like you connect and you make things together. Like I was in an anthology in 2000. It was either 2002 or not 2000, 2022 or 2023. And that came about directly as a result of being asked to be part of that anthology by other authors, because they liked my work. There's being asked to be on panels comes, sort of as a direct result from meeting other authors, other people in the industry. So like, yeah, absolutely. You get validation, and that validation's nice. Having said that, it's not something I target or chase.
Right.
I'm predominantly, I want to connect with readers, and sometimes authors are also readers. But I don't think you can wait for, I don't know. You can't like base your self-worth on waiting for other people to validate you, right?
Right.
That's going to come from inside you. Otherwise, you're always going to be doubting it. The person will stop talking and you'll immediately start doubting again. And that's no good.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. It's nice when it's like natural, like it's like oh, hey, you did a good job, or I love this book. But it shouldn't be like your sole goal to like seek validation, to be a part, to like saying like, oh yes, I want to be a part of this. And it's kind of leads into another question, which I forgot to ask, but I just remembered now, which I think is greatly important before we go on to the final question, is writing for trends and clicks, which that I think is a very important thing to discuss with any new author, because I've had this question on the show, and I asked this question because writing for clicks and trends, depending on how you approach it, can make you part of a huge success train, what's happening in the publishing world. But also, if you're behind the trend, you're behind the trend. You're not going to be a part of it. And even then, some authors who I've even interviewed said that it's not your best work because it's not truly you. It's not your authentic self. You're just writing to be a part of a click or trend that's very popular in the book publishing world. So, what are your thoughts on that question, Rachel?
So I think it comes back to your earlier question of like what your goals are, right? And knowing what it is you want. First off, if your big goal is to make it rich, you probably shouldn't become an author. Right. There are easier ways and less and more sure ways of making a lot of money than being an author. So if that's your number one drive, maybe pick a different profession. Having said that, there is still a lot of validity in people saying, I wanted to be a full-time writer. It's not necessarily about making millions, but like, I want to be able to do this full-time. In that case, yeah, you should probably pick a genre that's got some money behind it. Like that's part of the reason the romance genre is so huge, right? Like that's where the money is. 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100. If you talk to an author who makes like a full-time living most of the time, like, yeah, they're often romance writers, because the romance industry is so massive and so hungry for new content, right?
Right.
Having said that, so in that, there's total validity to being like, yep, this is a business. I'm ready to product that people want to consume. What are the trends right now? And can I turn a book out fast enough to hit that trend before it goes away? It's a totally valid approach if that's what you want to do. Having said that, there's a lot of evergreen genres out there, right? Like if you write a vampire series, even if vampires aren't hot right now, give it time, they will come back around.
Yes.
If you write a swords and sorcery, or you've got your dragons and your knights and your, what have you, give it a minute. Dragons will come back into style, like even if they're not popular right now. So, you don't necessarily have to chase the trend of today. You can chase the evergreen trend of like, even if it's not today, it will be, sometime in the next decade. So I can write this book now and really capitalize on it when that trend comes back around. That's valid too. That's fun.
Absolutely. And just as a little tangent, I cannot tell you how many authors who I've had on the show who are like romance, fantasy, or romancy is the term I've found out. That's what happens when you combine fantasy and romance. But there have been so many romancy authors I've had on the show. It's ridiculous. But you're absolutely correct. Like the romance genre is like huge. And you can even combine that with like romance, historical fiction, romance, sci-fi, and fantasy. Romance, fantasy. It's crazy.
So a popular stat that gets tossed around, the average person who considers themselves a reader in the United States reads about 6 books a year, right?
Right.
That's average. The average romance reader reads about 6 books a month. So you can see, there's a much bigger demand for it there. So that like content churn is really high, and there's a much bigger reader base that's willing to just churn out, they just, to pay money over and over and over again to get the next romance book. And typically, some of them will reread it, but oftentimes, they want something new, they want something new, they want something new. And that's part of what makes that industry so very lucrative.
Wow, I did not know that. I may just have to write my first fantasy romance or just a romance historical western, whatever. I'm going to capitalize on the romance genre. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I'm not a romance writer, but that just comes with like skill and training and just everything, which then kind of leads into the last question of the interview, Rachel. And one I think is very important, which is with everything that you've learned about the industry, with everything I've learned about marketing your book, making those connections, finding your readers, and just finding your place in the world of books and readers and everything, and making a brand for yourself, which I think is very huge to make a brand as an author. What is your word of wisdom to future authors out there who want to transition from writers writing as a hobby to writing professionally, be it like authors or just being or writing full time?
So let's see, what is my word of wisdom? That's a really big question. There's a lot of things I could say right now. If we're talking big picture, it's about how do we make that transition from being hobbyists to being business people. It's track everything. Like the numbers are more important than your gut. The numbers will help train your gut, right? Like test everything, and focus on finding a system that works well for you, not necessarily a system that works well for everyone, because you are not everyone.
Absolutely, 100%. And a lot of my guests have said the same thing, like find something that works for you. Definitely do your research, definitely do your homework, jot down notes on everything. But at the end of the day, find something that's going to work for you, because no one's going to write your story better than you. No one's going to know your story better than you. And if you do it right, if you do your research, you're going to be fine. And hey, even if your first book doesn't reach your expectations, that is okay. That's just room to grow. I said previously in my previous interview before this, grit trumps talent, which is now a new thing I'm going to add, because it is true. If you persevere, if you dedicate yourself to honing your craft as an author, you're going to reach talent. And that came from another indie author who I had earlier today, Tim, who said that it is important to have grit because, as he said, I don't care if you have like the best prose, you have your amazing way with words. That doesn't really interest me. It's your grit. It is how far are you willing to go to tell your story? Are you going to struggle the late nights of trying to edit? Are you going to struggle trying to find an editor and a cover artist for your book? Because that is also management of finances. If you're willing to go through all the hurdles and trials and tribulations and going through the fires and the flames, Dragon Force reference for anyone who knows that, that's the name of a song. If you're willing to go through all of that and still say, I want to do this, you're going to be fine. If you say, I'm not going to go through all those difficulties by someone being an author, you may want to reconsider your goals. You may want to reconsider where you are. Because at the end of the day, no one can tell your story better than you. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you can show your readers your growth as an author because even if it takes you your 7th, your 10th, even your 20th book that really gets your name out there, you can tell those people, if you've enjoyed this, see my growth as an author. And I think this is a perfect way to end this incredible interview. Thank you all for joining us for a late evening or morning, afternoon, whenever you're watching this video in the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to give a huge thank you to our guest, Rachel Beck, for coming on the show and telling us about her series, Defrag of the Glitch Logs. And be on the lookout for the episode release of this book because it will be coming soon. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Now, before we officially end, Rachel, where can people find and engage with you if they want to learn more about you, about the books, where to purchase them, and where they can find you at like any conferences or any conventions that may be happening in the summer or later this year?
So yeah, thank you so much. You can find my books at www.glitchlogs.com. You can hit me up on social media if you want to chat. I'm at Rachel Beck on Instagram, on Threads, on Twitter, though I don't check it very often. As far as upcoming shows, Hellmouth Con is coming up on June 15th, and I'm hoping to be there at that one. Beyond that, I will probably not be tabling at San Diego Comic-Con, but I'm looking at maybe being on a couple panels there. So if you want to catch up with me and you happen to be there, look for my name on the panels list. Beyond that, I am a WonderCon regular. You can pretty much always find me at table SPO3 every single year. And more to come. Keep an eye on my socials if you want to see more.
I will link all those down below in the description of this video. And with that, listeners, we officially end this interview. Again, I want to give a huge thank you to Rachel Beck for coming on the show, and we look forward to all of her success with her books and her other series. And who knows, we may have her on the show again to tell us more about her other works that she's been working on.
Thank you so much.
Well, listeners, I hope you enjoyed this late night author interview. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part, as well as what has been your favorite interview for today. If you know what I mean, you know. Until next time, this has been The Wandering Scribe and The Wandering Quill signing out. And until next time, have a wonderful evening.